Thank you, Karen, for your kind introduction. I am grateful to UX Insight for this amazing opportunity to discuss managing what we know with everyone here. Here in Australia, it's usual to commence presentations with an acknowledgement of country, showing respect for the traditional owners of country on which we are residing, and I'd therefore like to begin with such an acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I am presenting today, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples of the area now known as Canberra, and pay my respects to elders past and present. This image is of Timbabilla, just outside Canberra where I live. Timbabilla is an area of particular significance to local Aboriginal people and much loved by all Canberrans. I'm Alison, Lead Research Librarian, working in the Atlassian Research and Insights team. In early 2022, the team wanted to develop a research library that worked and decided to hire a librarian, me. Today, I will share with you some ideas on creating a simple research library which will manage your existing research. Why would you want to manage what you know? The research library, which I will show you how to create today, will, at very least, enable all researchers to find existing research on any topic, reducing duplicated research, enable researchers to easily conduct secondary research because you can quickly find all the relevant research on a topic and spend your time analysing and synthesising what you know. This enables prompt responses to stakeholder requests and enable your colleagues beyond the research team to self-serve into the library, helping themselves to the goodness of your research content. With those advantages, who wouldn't want a research library? But most teams don't have a librarian to create and manage your library, and managing research knowledge is usually done as a side task by researchers. I truly believe you can create a simple library that will assist at least the research team in undertaking research without any professional input from a librarian or similar, and as a side task to your main job, which will begin to effectively manage what your team knows. Today, we will focus on 3 key concepts that will enable you to set up a simple library which will provide a great start to managing what is known by your research team. These concepts are: don't collect, catalogue, concentrate on consistency, and the soon-to-be-revealed secret to widespread library adoption. Let's look in detail at each of these concepts and what they mean in practice. I've seen a lot of research libraries attempted by various research teams in the past few years. Most teams have gone to enormous trouble to gather all their research content into a single place. When I ask them why they collect their research, they don't know. Maybe it's because this is what we think of when we hear the word library, a very organised collection of books. So we assume that to have a library, our research needs to be neatly collected into a single space. But when you think about it, there's no advantage in gathering your research content together. Physical books are only collected in a library and lent out to people because that's the most effective way of making physical books widely available. In a research team, where I hope no one is producing their research content as a printed book, the most effective way to make our research content widely available is to tell our users what research exists and provide the URL for each research artifact so they can find the research relevant to them. In this model, the library is where relevant content is recorded and discovered through being directed to its URL, and is not a collection of content at all. The Atlassian Research Library records all the Research and Insights team's content and enables it to be found, but contains absolutely nothing. Now that's great news for all of us, because suddenly the seemingly insurmountable task of collecting all your research content into one space including converting it into a format that allows it to be included in that space, completely vanishes. You don't have to spend time migrating the content or converting the content at all. So, what are we to do instead? What do I mean by the word catalogue when I suggest you shouldn't collect, but catalogue? I mean that you should concentrate on building a space which describes all your research content consistently. In other words, your library, like the Atlassian Research Library, is actually a simple library catalogue. Let's have a look at what this kind of library looks like. Here is a mock-up of exactly such a library. This is not the Atlassian Research Library, it's a mock-up. This is built in Confluence databases, which you now have access to if you have Confluence. There are other tools that will do a similar job, such as Airtable and SharePoint lists. Now, this mock-up only contains 4 pretend records. You might look at this and think, well, even if that contained hundreds of records, that's so simple. Are you sure? I recently saw a beautiful research library like this being developed by someone who I think might be here today. A shout out to you, Isabel, if you're here. One of her concerns was that this approach was too simple, but I was able to assure her that she was on exactly the right track. The beauty of this approach is precisely that it is so simple. It is relatively easy to set up, easy to maintain, and better still, it works. I'm going to now attempt to jump off the slides and over into this mock library embedded in Confluence to show you how it works behind the scenes. Just bear with me a minute. Ah, fantastic. That wasn't too difficult at all. So, what do we need to think about when we're in such a library? Hold on. Yes, we are showing that one, but I was not on the right screen. There we are. That's better. Let's look at the elements of this library that enables the research content to be consistently described. Firstly, the fields along the top here. We need to think about what attributes of our research content will be searched for by library users to separate one piece of research from another, and then provide fields for each of those attributes. So, for example, at Atlassian, our researchers often know the researcher who conducts research in their area, and they want to find research by that researcher. We therefore include a field to allow them to search by author. We have a lot of products at Atlassian, so our users definitely want to search by product, and we therefore include a product field. And our research, like yours, covers a wide variety of topics, such as product features or a customer experience. Users must be able to find research related to these topics, so a topics field will be essential in almost all research library. In all these fields, we always enter the information consistently. But what consistent means varies depending upon the field. In some fields like title, the actual wording will vary for every piece of content, as all artifacts will probably have a unique title. How we enter that title, though, should still be consistent. For example, the Atlassian Research Library always records the title exactly as it is displayed at the top of the research report. But there's other fields where we're describing concepts common across many reports, and we need to enforce the use of one term to describe that common concept wherever it occurs in our research content. Let's look at the product field here first to see what I mean. One of our products, as you all know, is called Confluence, and we obviously want everyone in our organization to be able to find all the research on Confluence. Within Atlassian, Confluence is often referred to by a shortened name and by a nickname. So mandating that we always use the term Confluence for any report or artifact about Confluence is important. The tag Confluence is therefore included in the list of terms that are allowed to be used within the library, within the products field. This mock library is set up so that we can select multiple terms from this term list for any library record. So we can select all the products that are mentioned in the particular research artifact. Likewise, we use a term list for our topics to ensure that we always describe a topic using the same term. In this list, we have included the term purchase. If a report refers to purchasing a product or buying a product or procuring a product, we will always tag it with the term purchase. Again, this is set up so that we can select all relevant topic terms from this list to apply to each record. Why do we take the trouble to create term lists and only allow terms from that term list to be selected? Well, applying the term confluence to all research about confluence enables users to ultimately find all the research about confluence. Likewise, all research on the experience of purchasing a product can be found by users searching on the word purchase, regardless of whether that research refers to purchasing, buying, or procuring. Being this consistent in how we describe our research is the absolute key to the success of your library, because it enables the user to find all the research on a product or topic of interest to them. And when users combine these terms in the library to pinpoint research of relevance to them, such consistency quickly becomes very powerful. To understand this better, let's have a go at running this library live. Because this library is hosted in Confluence databases, it has some searching and filtering capability. Let's make use of that to show you the strength of consistent description, even with this very small data set of 4 research reports. So, our library user wants to find research on purchasing Confluence. And so here in the search box, they might type the word purchase. Oops, if I can spell. And you can see that immediately we're down to just 2 records with the word purchase in those records. Now, if they had a long list of results here, rather than just 2 and couldn't see it immediately, and wanted to find only reports on purchasing Confluence, they could also do that using filters. So we can apply a filter, add a filter, we select the product field because we're looking for a product, we select contains, and we select start typing in Confluence. And you can see that we're immediately down to just 1 record that contains the product Confluence and the experience of purchasing. Now, if they had, I have demonstrated this with terms from 2 different fields, but it also works equally well with any number of terms from 1 field. I often search for a number of specific terms within the topics field in the Atlassian Research Library. I also combine searches in fields with unique content for each record, such as the title or the abstract field, and fields controlled by term lists, such as the topic field. Combining these all work really well in pinpointing relevant content. If you imagine a library with many hundreds of reports and artifacts, rather than just 4, all consistently well described by well-curated term lists and by consistent entry, you can see how this library enables users to quickly find highly relevant research content. To summarize how you go about creating such a library, firstly, think about the fields you need to describe all the research attributes which are important to users of your library. Then think about how you're going to, we're on the right screen here? I don't think we are. No, we are not. I'm not showing the right slides, am I, Karen, at the moment? I'll try again with that. Present something else. Let's try this instead. That will be better. That's much better. Let's go on. So I'll start that section again so you can actually follow along with where I am. To summarize how you'd go about creating such a library. Firstly, think about the fields you need to describe all the research attributes which are important to users of your library. Then think about how you're going to ensure consistency in the information recorded in each field. And I think this is probably the hardest bit of any library. Pay attention to entering unique information, such as a title, in a broadly consistent fashion. And consider which fields will need a term list to ensure the application of consistent terms so that users can find all relevant research. Term lists can start very simply. If there's one thing I'd do differently now, if I was starting the Atlassian Research Library today, it would be to begin with a much simpler term list for my topics field. I think that just beginning with very broad terms like feature or customer experience can be legitimate, as even that broad level of description will start to distinguish between research on different topics. The Atlassian Research Library uses a complex hierarchical taxonomy controlling the language in our topic field, and truth be told, it could do with some simplifying. Creating a taxonomy required in-depth analysis of terminology across hundreds of reports, which of course is a valid approach if you have the resources to do that. But truly, if you start your term list very simply and broadly, you as researchers are likely to already be aware of the high-level terms of your research content and can begin your topic term list much more simply just by using a term for each of these high-level themes in your initial term list. You could always go deeper with your terms later, although I acknowledge this may require some retrospective application of newly added terms to your existing content. Whatever approach you take, because it's your term list, it can and should always change and grow. So be bold with your term lists. You can't get them wrong. They're also never perfect, and you can always change them. To populate your library, I'd suggest starting with the research you're doing when your library is ready to receive content. Once new content is being contributed smoothly and the library is beginning to run nicely, you can then consider back capturing older research. You may not need to capture it all. You may want to capture it lightly and not fill in every field, just the critical ones. If you create a library like this, I know that you will soon have a library that is being well used by your research team to quickly identify relevant content for secondary research and to reduce duplication. That alone makes the research library so worthwhile. But, and here I'm going to get controversial, if you really want your library to grow and to be adopted, particularly beyond the research team, I think you will eventually find that you need to hire a person dedicated to running it. So my secret to getting your library adopted across your organization is to, sorry folks, hire a librarian or a similar information professional, such as an archivist or a records manager. Because to get it really humming, you need to go beyond this library, which is just the library as a tool, and develop a whole library as a service around it. What do I mean by a library as a service? Well, here's the main activities I currently undertake to support all Atlassians to make excellent use of the library. This is my library as a service. You can see that there is so much more that goes into enabling people to use the library well and therefore getting it adopted into their daily work. To mention some briefly, for me, it includes encouraging a culture among those who can contribute of contributing research content to the library, running library workshops to assist any Atlassian to find relevant information or to provide training on using the library, and providing desk research support to the research team, which further speeds up our team's response to stakeholders. All of this is in addition to the small matter of maintaining the library, including maintaining the associated term lists and taxonomies. It is this library as a service that has enabled the adoption of the Atlassian Research Library across Atlassian, because it is no longer just a tool thrown at people to use, but a service which supports researchers to manage what they know and which supports the entire company to discover what is known by the research team in a timely and decision-ready fashion. Less than 2 years since the library was launched, about 10% of all Atlassians have used the library, and 1/3 of those users are repeat users. They tell me that they love the ease of self-serving into the library to quickly find relevant research content for themselves, while also appreciating the support available. The great news is that if you have developed a simple library, such as I've been demonstrating today, and you eventually bring a dedicated information professional on board to run the library, they will love that this simple library is already available. They'll be able to immediately make use of it to start developing a library as a service. And the consistent data applied to the library will provide an excellent basis for future library development. So, at Atlassian, with a library on a highly functional platform, a librarian, and a well-developed library as a service, is managing what we know at Atlassian at the point where I, as the librarian, can sit back, relax, and everything will work smoothly. So this is a picture of the very front end of our actual Atlassian Research Library. For me, truly one of the best aspects of working as a librarian is that a library, both the tool and the library service, is never complete. It's always changing, growing, and developing, and it's therefore also always going to be imperfect. For us, we have almost all the existing research content from the Research and Insights team discoverable through the Atlassian Research Library, and all the services I previously mentioned supporting everyone with using the library. I know that this is currently unusual in research teams, and I'd love to see it become way more usual. But even at this stage of knowledge management maturity, we have some big questions before us. Atlassian has democratized research, and we're grappling with whether to include research done by people outside the research team in the library. We've recently run a proof of concept to include some data science analysis content in the library, and are now wondering, should we further expand the scope of what the library collects to include research created outside the research team? Our other big question is, how far can the library go while it only has one dedicated staff member, which I know is one more than almost all other research teams have, but is a live question against which all questions of growth and scaling need to be run. So, those are two big challenges that we currently face, on which I'd welcome some further discussion. Equally, I'd love to answer any questions you have about managing what you know through developing a simple library, as has been demonstrated here, and I so look forward to discussing more broadly how UX researchers can manage what we know. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Alison. That was so helpful. Yeah, Tao.
Hello. Thank
Hi.
you so much for your presentation. It was very interesting. We actually, at my company, we have a similar catalog. However, we face the problems that our research reports are not standardized. So even if it's findable, people find a lot of different mirror boards in those reports, which are very rather unstructured, and still you need a person who helps you with going through these insights. So I was wondering, how do you have similar challenges, and how do you deal with them? I would be very interested in that.
That's an interesting question. I think one thing people expected me to do when I joined Atlassian was to standardize the reports, but that's not been a high priority for me. We're lucky, I think, in that at Atlassian, the researchers are required to produce a report at the end of their research project. It's generally in Confluence. Some of the time it has a summary, and some of the time it has its recommendations at the top, and some of the time it has its findings somewhere near the top as well. Beyond that, they can vary quite a bit, but they are always written in full, and they do give a good context to everything else. in the Atlassian Research Library, when we make a record of the research, we don't make a record for each artifact. We make a record for the whole research project. And in that record, we include that research report, beautifully written up, which gives the context to the whole thing. And we also include the Miro boards. We include links to raw data with appropriate privacy. We include a researcher's shareback in slides and videos. We include data dashboards. So we include all the artifacts that have been created within that research project in the one record. But I think that we have the research report, even though it's a little bit inconsistent, is the glue that kind of gives that context to the whole piece of research and enables people to interpret the other outputs. So if they're seeing a Miro board, they already have this research report, even though it is slightly inconsistent. And that helps provide the context, if that makes sense. That's not my work. That's the work very much of the research team and the culture that's been engendered within the research team. And in that regard, I've been extremely fortunate. So I think to have something consistent that gives that context is very helpful to giving context within the library. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, so we have a question by Romy. She asked, how do you proactively share insights throughout the company instead of waiting for people to come to the repository?
That's a really good question. The research library itself is widely promoted, particularly, obviously, all the research team knows it. It's well known amongst our design team. It's well known among our product managers. But we don't wait for, I guess two things happen. There's sort of three audiences for our research library. The first are the researchers who know about it, and they are using it all the time to respond to stakeholder questions, to start their research off, but particularly that response to stakeholder questions, where they're able to put a new term or term from the stakeholder question or terms into the library. And even though we may not have a piece of research actually on that stakeholder question, they can find all sorts of things within the research turned up by that library search that provides new insights and new ways of looking at things just by putting that new question over the top of the whole lot. So they're using it. We've also got people who do research, so democratized people out of the research teams who be out of the non-research teams who'd be using it in similar ways for research. And then we've got all of Atlassian who do love being able to come to the library because they used to sometimes wait up to a month to come and to ask a question about research, wait for it to go all the way up the research team and come all the way back down. Now, instead of waiting that month for it to come to go and find it, they can come into the research library and find what they're wanting, usually in a few minutes. They're the team they're the group that it's really hard to get the message to about the research library. It's hard enough, as I remember, sitting in a law firm in the middle of a library with people passing the library all the time to remind people that the library exists, let alone when you're sitting in a company of 10,000 distributed around the globe where you don't see them physically. It is quite hard to get the word out there about the library. But I'm really happy that we've had about 1,250 Atlassians using the library, heavily from those teams that really need it, such as product managers and designers, as well as researchers. And it's just a matter, I guess, of keeping on plugging away. And I think it's more in the use of the library than in the library itself, if that makes sense, that new insights surface. I hope that makes sense. I hope that's answered your question somewhat.
So Romy, I hope this answered your question. Otherwise, maybe you can let us know. Maybe Tina, you can ask your question.
Yeah, hi. I'm just wondering, because we are starting in a small group here in Vienna, which is called Research Melange, to talk about knowledge management in the next few workshops. And usually it's people who have one or maybe two researchers at the company. So hiring even a researcher is problematic, not a librarian. That is such an ideal, but not possible. So my question would be, as a librarian, what would you tell such a group? What are the most important skills they should be aiming for when trying to catalog? Because I love the idea of cataloging the knowledge. So they do a kind of good job, not the best one, of course, because that's not just possible.
So you're talking about a scenario here where you can't even quite manage knowledge as a side task because you don't have enough researchers to do that. So you're talking about a sole researcher or maybe two who are trying to manage what they know with very few resources. When I arrived at Atlassian, there was one that they had not much knowledge management. They had, which one they brought me in, they hadn't done terribly much, but the one thing they had done, which was absolutely brilliant, was they had a Confluence table. Confluence databases didn't exist then, and in that Confluence table they just listed the name of their report, the date of their report, that was useful, the author of the report, and they had a thing called team. And team was interesting because sometimes they thought it meant the team they were internally in, the UX research team, or they thought it meant that it was the team who had commissioned the report. So that column was a mess. And a link to the report. Fabulous. Now, they couldn't search that. You could now do the same thing in a Confluence database or an Achievable or a SharePoint, depending what you might have access to. And even something as simple as that will give you a beginning. The great thing about Confluence databases or Airtable or SharePoint lists or something like that is that unlike that Confluence table, some searching is available. So I'd keep the fields really, really small. I'd just keep them as small as possible. Make sure you've got a title, what it's called, a link, so you know where it is, and maybe the author. And a date. That would be useful too. So keep it, do as I guess, do a very similar thing to what I've shown you tonight, but keep it super, super simple. And then gradually over time, if the team grows and it becomes more complicated, you can build from there. Even a list of titles that you can search on will provide you with some start as to remembering what it is you have on the topic or that you're currently interested in, currently researching. As long as the titles aren't too creative, perhaps. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
I think we have a question by, I'm not sure if I pronounce your name correctly, Raisha. That actually ties back to this. So if you have the list with all the reports in there, how do you track the actuality of the content, and who is responsible for doing so? Or do you have some sort of mechanism to let colleagues report obsolete information?
So by actuality of the content here, I guess you're meaning the ongoing relevance of the content, whether it should be in the library in the first place, those kind of issues, and how we go about what librarians would call deaccessioning, getting rid of old content, that kind of thing. So at the moment, as I said, content going into the library is from the research and insights team only. And so that one of the reasons for that is we have confidence in that content. And we know that's been through a particular process. And that's the case for data scientists too. They have likewise gone through a process where their manager has seen the content and is happy to let it be published. And so that's how, for the time being, we know about the veracity of the content within the research library. Where our team has been doing research for 5 years, since 2019. I recently suggested we have research going back to that stage, not complete. It gets a bit more not as complete as we go further back in time. We have to go back to 2018. And I'm talking now about, we're going with my managers about what I need to do, and very shortly, is to write what we call a de-accessioning policy, to say when the content reaches about 5 years old, it should be looked at to see what kind of research it is. There is some research, for example, lots of usability research, where we're looking at, does this button work well? To be very simple, it's not going to last forever. Bigger questions like, how do people work in teams? How do they use our software in their work and in working with each other? Probably are going to be a lot more relevant for a lot longer. So we'll look at things like, how old is the research? What is it about? To make up, to apply consistently what we're going to leave in the library and what we're going to take out. I was actually doing a workshop the other day with someone. We were looking at AI research, and in a workshop, the person will bring their question, I'll bring my library skills, or we'll work together on that to find them the research content they really need. So we're talking about AI tools, and as soon as we got to 2023 research, so research from last year, we were both agreeing, oh no, that's for this question about AI, which I won't go into before, but for this question about AI, 2023 research about AI is probably no longer relevant, which was a bit scary. So we're going to develop a way of weeding the library, getting rid of old content in the library by looking at both the age of it, the topic of it, and how long it's likely to be relevant for, if that answers the question. So
once more, it's really helpful if you have a librarian in your team.
But you could, yeah, I think researchers, though, they probably have a better feel certainly than I first did, of, you have a feel if the research you're doing right now is going to be useful in a year's time, or 2 years' time, or 5 years' time. Those little things about how people use something right now, which you might be hoping to see change because they can't use it very well, may not be relevant in a year's time. But the bigger questions may well have a much longer life, and therefore you might want to keep them in the library a bit longer. And you might want to get to a certain age, like I'm thinking about 5 years, and anything that's still in the library after 5 years probably needs to be well reviewed to see what it is and whether it needs to be thrown out. But that would require a librarian.
Exactly. Kathleen?
Yes, really enjoying this conversation. Whenever you're answering questions, I think of 5 more, like, oh. But what I want to ask is the following, and that is about tools. So you chose Confluence because you need to use your own tool, obviously, and it's what everyone has access to. But how do you feel about these other tools that are on the market where you can, divide into nuggets and then, like remix and get people to kind of get their own insights by combining different types of research? What is your take on this?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm currently, yes, we actually don't use Confluence. Shocker. We don't use Confluence as the basis for our library. So the mock library I showed you today in Confluence databases, that's a way that I can see of getting started. For the Atlassian Research Library, we use a different tool altogether. And it's an interesting tool. It's a tool that sits between Airtable and Confluence databases and SharePoint, in that it is something that I can configure myself. I can build the term lists, I can build the taxonomy that I use. Sits between that and library catalogs, which would be way too set for us to use. We need something much more flexible. It also sits in a funny place between, it is not designed for UX research specifically. It is neutral, therefore, as to what kind of research is done in the team. It doesn't, it was designed for small law libraries and the like. I didn't know about it when I was a law librarian. I wish I had. And so it's very neutral as to the type of research. There's some tools out there that are very much designed to ingest research reports. There's other tools out there in the UX research world that are more looking at atomic research and insights. For our team, it needs to be something that can handle research reports, because that's where we culturally are at the moment. It's a live issue for me because I'm trying to stay aware of what is available out there as a platform for research libraries, particularly if you have a research librarian and have someone to really look after the tool. My feeling is that knowledge management within UX research is generally fairly immature. That is reflected in what is in the scope of tools available out there, which actually seem to be very, very small. And then it becomes a bit of a conundrum, doesn't it? Is our practice immature because we have no tools, or are there no tools because our practice is immature? I'm not quite sure. I am struggling to find, because I'd like to be able to say to my managers, we are currently using this tool, which is doing very well for us. I can see some ways to develop into the future. And to do that, we may want to consider this platform or this platform. Truth be told, I'm struggling to do that a bit. If anyone has any ideas about some fabulous research library platforms, I have all ears. I've been very open about what it's called in some of my blogs. What the platform is. It's a platform called Know All Matrix by Bailey Solutions, a tiny UK company, and it's working very well for us for the time being. It's not designed for UX research specifically, but it is flexible. It is easy to use. It handles the taxonomy fairly well, which Confluence databases and Airtable unfortunately don't at this stage. It gives us some metrics, those kind of things. But I have been discovering over the last few weeks how surprisingly few platforms there might be out there for good management. If I find something, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
And for now, we're very happy with Know All Matrix for us and for our needs. But if I'd had Confluence databases when I first started as a librarian, particularly if it had been developed to this stage at Atlassian, I would have been starting with that for sure and going as far as I could with that, or Airtable or SharePoint lists. Yeah.
Yeah, we used Confluence in my team several years ago, and it was fairly okay. But it really required one person taking care of it and keeping it neat and doing well. Like you said, we all need a librarian on our team for sure.
Yes. It'd be lovely, wouldn't it? I think it'd be great. Yes.
Dreams
I think
come
so would all.
true. Thanks
This
for
is the
sharing.
main conclusion. I think I have a question here from Job, or Job, I don't know. I think it relates to something we were discussing before the meetup started. Alison, he says, I can imagine the advantages of a library as you presented, but they are also looking for a way to improve accessibility of insights and raise visibility of relations, connections between insights. And is this something you are working on or thinking about as well?
Good question. We've just gained a new head of research. So which direction she wants to take us in remains to be seen. To date, it is fair to say that the Atlassian research team, when the previous head of research arrived, there was no Atlassian research team. She began the research team in about 2018. And for that research team, building confidence in the veracity of the research they were doing was the primary goal at that time. And so research reports have been a big thing. But I was talking about the library workshops before, where I go into a library workshop where they know what they want to ask me. This is any Atlassian can come and do this for 30 minutes with me. I go with some knowledge of the library, and together we find content that is useful for them. I am often sorely aware that I am not sending them away with the answer. What I'd love to be able to do is to send them away with a decision-ready answer. This is the perspective of research on this question. That'd be marvelous. What I'm instead sending them away with, I can see them almost staggering out of the workshop with a pile of research reports staggering under the weight of them. And sometimes they say to me, "What does this mean?" And it nearly kills me, because I know that I and other and researchers within the team could synthesize and analyze those reports with their question over the top of it, and we'd be able to tell them, this is what this all means about your question that you have. A piece of work we started earlier this year before the previous head of research left, she was very keen on looking at using the library to distill from all those research reports what we knew on key topics. I think she hoped that we'd be able to pick out those key topics for people, but I think what is the flavour of the month, what people want to know, is a little bit unpredictable. I do find, as I say, that when we get a question from a stakeholder and we apply that question to the library, even when we don't have a research project that's directly talked to that topic or that question, we almost always, we always find something within the research reports that gives them some idea of what some answer to their question. And we can generally prepare something that gives them some decision-ready information. So that point of view, that distilled, opinionated point of view, is one way that we might go, and the library could help with that. I think there's all sorts of other ways it could go. We could look at making it much more insight-based, if that is the way the new head of research wants to go. So here's our insights, here's the reports that inform those insights. That would be one way to go. And I can think of some tools that we might want to use if we were doing that. So for us, no, at the moment it has been all about the reports. Again, it's a bit of a watch this space to see what happens with our new head of research and the way she wants to take things. But I can see ways you could use a simple library like this to connect some of the insights and to say, here's the insight and this is where, so the other way around. So this is the insight and these are the reports and the artifacts and the content that we use to come up with that insight.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say too, sorry, Karen, that until you know what you've got, until you actually can say to yourself, I can find the content, it's hard to create insights. I think insights often really heavily rely. I hear, for example, I cannot remember his name, apologies. The gentleman who runs Gleanly, who's really promoted atomic research, talking about the importance of a taxonomy. And he and I absolutely would agree on that viewpoint. It's vital to know what you've got before you can actually really understand what that means by way of insights, I think.
It's morning where I am, so good day, everyone. Alison, thank you so much. Karen, thank you so much. This is great to meet with you and hear this wonderful presentation. My question I had put in the chat, so you can ignore it because I'm going to be able to answer it now, or ask for help with this. When you conducted a knowledge audit, or how you may refer to it as another way, when you sat down with the team and asked them what they wanted in the library or in the collection, how did you record the feedback? And do you have it documented somewhere? And then what tool did you use? It probably, I'm assuming something like a spreadsheet or something, or maybe a survey. And then do you regularly then audit and figure out, what they want, and on a set schedule? So I was just asking about your process of getting information.
Sure, that's a good question. The content going into the library was set. The task was to make sure that all research for the Research and Insights team was included in the library. And the bigger problem, though, was I walked into Atlassian and I said to Atlassian, to the Research and Insights team, hi, I'm here. What do you want in a digital library? And they looked at me and went, I don't know, because they'd never met a digital library before. It was all university libraries or public libraries. And so for the first 6 months, what we decided to do was to create a proof of concept library so that we could have a conversation about what a library could be and what it could look like and what it might include. That took 6 months to build, It's about 5 months, 4 or 5 months. Finding a platform on which to build it. If only Confluence databases had been available then. We used Google Sheets for all sorts of reasons. And that created a Google Sheets spreadsheet that had some search capability, and it recorded every artifact line by line. And it had fields, and it had sort of term lists. It had term lists. The taxonomy was a bit of a mess. The research and insights leaders liked it so much that they thought they were going to make it the permanent library. But what I mainly used it for was to discuss with researchers what they liked about that library, what they didn't like, and any ideas they had. And that surfaced all sorts of things. For example, the reason we have an entire project described in each record was the idea of one of the researchers who I was talking with, and they suggested that idea. Things like including the abstract that we do in the Atlassian Research Library. That, again, was one of our researchers' ideas. They had lots of ideas about fields to include. They had lots of ideas about connecting the research. It was things I didn't really expect. And so that's how we created the library together, and it really was. If you want to know more about that, I have a blog out there on designing the library, co-designing a digital library, which talks about that. And then, yes, I am always seeking feedback. We send out a survey to just 10 users once a fortnight, and that gets about a 30 to 40% response. And then again, just ask what you like, what do you dislike. Sorry, it asks about whether they find useful content, whether they'll return, and one other question. And we also ask them if they'd like to have a 15-minute chat with me. And that again is just the like, dislike, surprising. And that's just, yeah, that's fabulous for getting ideas about what people really, how people would like the library to develop further. Yeah.
Hey.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you've mentioned it before. Are researchers the main contributors to the library, or also other roles contributing to it? Because at least in my company, there are different roles who have also a lot of insights and knowledge, like customer success or sales, and of course, customer support. And I would like to know, how do you include also their kind of insights? Because I assume they don't write research reports. I'm quite curious about that.
Yeah. So at the moment, no, we only include research and insights reports and content, with one exception, which I'll talk about in a minute. The reason for that is really twofold. The first is that you're all going to laugh, but there is only me running the library, and we've got a research team. Sorry, folks, who've got a much smaller team. We've got a research team of about 50 people, of whom about 45 are researchers. So we have a lot of research content coming through. And so that's one thing. And how, making sure that we can scale the library is therefore important before we accept any more content. And making sure that when we scale the library, we can do that well and keep descriptions well done. As the research content is really well described, if we take in any more content, it needs to be equally well described. So how do we do that? There is also the question then of veracity and that kind of thing. A research team, a researcher's research report goes through, we know that they know how to do research, it gets looked at by their manager, all that kind of thing before it gets published. So there's a real process to that. And we know it's got veracity. When you look at what's called research out of the wider world of Atlassian, there is a lot of really, really great research. And there is some that's just a record of a customer conversation, which is not invalid, but it's not research either. So that's a debate we're actually having live right now. And one thing we've recently done is to take on, oh, thank you, Debbie. I couldn't find my own LinkedIn link. So thank you, Debbie, so much for that. One thing we've just tried is taking on data science, just two of their very small teams, some of their research content, To do that, we actually changed the way we get people to contribute to the library. It used to be through Google or a Jira form, and I'd be copying and pasting the title and the author and the date into the library. That seemed a bit silly because they were always getting it right. So Bailey Solutions, the vendor, and I worked together to make a contributor form in the library. It's a tiny thing, but when they contribute that form now to the library, it creates a record immediately. And then I come in and I apply my taxonomy and make sure that the record is basically right and still is consistent. And that saved a massive time. And it means that everyone, when they give their research content to the library, it can be immediately seen. Really useful because, yes, that has meant the library can scale a lot more. But the other thing we found is that adding in that data science content, which is also very carefully prepared, really adds strength to the stories we are telling to our stakeholders outside. Because now, when I do some desk research, I was just doing some today, and up came, although we've only got a very, very small amount of data science content in the library, they're doing research on the same things that we're doing research, or they're doing data science on the same things that we're doing research on. And therefore, no surprises, the story that we're telling and the story that they're telling support each other, which is not a surprise at all, but it's fabulous. And we are actually in the same now, at the moment, in the same very broad team at Atlassian. So we can say our whole team's story supports each other's story. And so I think it's a really powerful thing when everyone is comfortable that that content going in has veracity and is okay. So I'd like to see the library expand further, and I think it can expand further. How much further, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's going to win the day, though, with the new head of research. I'm not sure how that will go. It may be that they would prefer to actually concentrate on telling the story of what we already know with our own content, which is still, there is so much to explore in that alone. So we'll see which way it goes. I could see it both ways. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. And I would, one of the biggest problems we have when people come to use the library is they say, I used the library and I couldn't find my friend, my colleague here over in product management or over here in design. I couldn't find their content. And I have to say the reason is because it's only research and insights at the moment. And so there is massive demand for the library. Although I'd have people say to me, why do you need a library? Can't the library just all be done by AI? And at the same time, the other big question I get is when can I put my research into the library? So yeah. Anyway.
Two different sides. So my suggestion is that we will wrap this Q&A session up, because I know, Alison, you're talking for such a long time, and we're so grateful for you sharing all your knowledge, but I can imagine it's time for you also to sit back and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Oh, it's been so much fun. Thank you.
So,
I really enjoyed it.
So once more, a big warm applause for you, Alison. So I'll do a live one. And thank you for staying here. If any of the rest of you have any more questions or things to discuss, let us know, or be in touch with Alison. And we want to keep this discussion definitely going. Thanks for joining us. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, Michelle, and evening, Alison. And I'm not sure where the rest of you are based, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's been an absolute delight. Thank you.